With a lot of the issues that are going on today, I had somebody say to me, how can these people be so deceived? Well, today on Daily Renewal, I'm going to talk to you about how to deal with people that you think are operating in deception. Well, this past weekend, I had the opportunity to minister to a church out of town. And after the service was done, there was many people gathering around talking about one of the things that's happening in our culture right now, and that is the V passports. You know, whether you're in the United States or Canada, and there's other places around the world, this is a really hot topic. And even in church, and you know, as this topic was touched upon, I found it amazing, the passion that people had in talking about this particular topic. And one person blurted out, how can some of these people be so deceived about this topic? And that's what I want to deal with today. How to deal with people who are deceived. I'm Pastor Lyle, and welcome to Daily Renewal. If this is your first time with us, I just want to ask you to consider becoming a subscriber to our channel. If you are getting benefit out of our content, please like and share this video with anybody that you think it will help. Well, when we look at this particular topic, it is amazing how polarized the views on this are. You know, there seems to be this us versus them mentality. And as Christians, I think we have to be very careful on how we deal with these things. You know, the idea of, how can these people be so deceived? It comes down to, in dealing with that, deception, in any form, we have to understand has been happening since the very beginning. So how we deal with deception in any area really hasn't changed that much. But I do find it amazing how a lot of people, when they look at some of these topics of the day, they have way more passion about them than the greatest deception that we've ever experienced. And that's the deception that started in the Garden of Eden, the deception that caused man to be separated from God. And from there, as a Christian, our role is to try and help people to have the veil taken from their eyes so they can see that there is a way to get by that great deception, and that is through relationship with Jesus Christ. Now, as I mentioned, though, that great deception, some of the ways that we get through that, some of those principles can be used in dealing with some of the deceptions in our culture today. So I want to talk to you about that and how that fits today. So let's start off by understanding, when we look at the Bible, there's many places where it talks about in the last days that that there will be deceivers and there will be people that are deceived. In 2 Timothy 3:13, it says, but evil men and impostors will grow worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. Matthew 24:11 talks about the fact that many prophets will rise up and deceive many. And of course, we can look at Mark 13:22, and there's many more, but Mark 13:22 talks about the fact that false Christs and false prophets will rise and show signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. So we see here that even though you're a Christian, that's who the elect is mentioning here, there's potential for all of us to fall into different types of deception. Now, primarily, this is talking about spiritual deception, but with a lot of these things, they do go hand in hand. A lot of the things in our culture today that we perceive as being spiritual often isn't really spiritual. If you followed any of our past episodes of Daily Renewal, I would liken that to some of the episodes that talk about, we often fall into what we look at as our God-given rights that actually weren't God-given rights. Some of them were, some of them aren't. And we need to ask the Lord to help us decipher what things we should actually be standing up for that are biblical, and what things that maybe the church culture that we're in, the things that are happening in our culture that maybe are man-made things that we stand up for, thinking that maybe we're standing up for our rights that are God-given. Again, those are other messages for another day. So I want to get into dealing with How do we deal with people that are deceived? Well, first off, before I get into that part, I think the most important thing that we have to understand is there's a possibility that we could be the ones that are deceived. I've looked back over the years at things that I thought were absolutes, that as I humbled myself before the Lord, there's things that, different doctrines and stuff that I know I could easily say that I bit into over the years that I thought were absolutely true. But as I stayed close to the Lord in His timing, He would reveal to me things that I needed to see at the times that I needed to see them. But the way revealing happens to us is when we humble ourselves before God and are continually asking Him. And my first thing in dealing with this particular topic that I would challenge you with is this: don't just think that you are right about the topic. You should always be willing to get before the Lord and say, Lord, if there is a deception that I have bitten into, please reveal it to me. That's first and foremost, before we get into how we deal with others that we don't think are on the right path, that that don't line up with the opinions we have, the ones that we think are naive, or and that's using one of the nice terms that I see on some of the social media platforms about people who don't agree with our views on things. We have to first be willing to get before the Lord and say, Lord, in some of these things that I am biting into that I really think are important, where do you stand on these things? Because I don't want to be deceived. And it's important that we understand this, that when it comes to the word deception, if somebody is deceived, we have to keep in mind that if they are deceived, they don't know they are deceived. And this is an absolute pivotal understanding that we have to have. If someone is deceived, they don't know they are deceived. Now, there's people that might go to try to deceive people, that might know exactly what they're doing, but when we see those that are talked about, in the last days, there's some that are going to deceive and some that are going to be deceived. There is a difference between somebody who is trying to deceive often. Often they will know what the truth is, but they're trying to deceive someone else. There's a difference between that and somebody who, and that's more often than not, and somebody who is deceived, who just, again, if you're deceived, you don't know you are deceived. So we have to keep that in mind in dealing with people that are operating, under a spirit of deception, or what we'll call the people that are deceived. So I want to look at a story today about how Paul, the great evangelist Paul, dealt with people who were deceived. Now, we have to understand something about Paul, is everything in his life was geared towards understanding that people who didn't know Jesus were separate from God, and his lifelong goal was to help save people from an eternity that was separate from God. And in Christian circles, we often talk about that as being saved. He wanted to see people being saved. So if you're not familiar with that term, that's what this is referring to, is the idea of us having a separate relationship with God, or from God, and now as a result of that, we are all on a road to perdition. God is not sending people to hell, but because of what started in the bloodline of Adam's separation, and we're all in that bloodline. I'll try to keep this short, but we've got other sessions that will explain this better. But all of us, as a result of what happened in the garden, have all got tainted blood, and we've all found ourselves in this position of separation. And also, all of us from that place have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. None of us can stand perfect before God without Jesus, but that's why Jesus came. And Paul understood this. So his mission was to help people understand the gospel, which is that fact that Jesus came so that when we believed upon him, when we acknowledged what Jesus came to do, repented of our sin, believed on him, trusted in him and his sacrifice, this began the process of seeing us reconciled back to God. This is what we term as Christians as being saved. So Paul understanding this, made it his goal that he wanted to tell as many people as he possibly could that there was a way to be saved, and it was through Jesus. So we pick up this story in the book of Acts. We're going to be talking in Acts chapter 17 today, but we have to understand Paul's mindset as we go into this particular story. He's going around to all of these places, and anybody that he'll listen, he'll preach the gospel to in hopes that they will be saved. Now, as I say that, it's also under the understanding that he wasn't mad at these people, but he understood that these people were deceived into believing either that things were okay or they could trust other gods. There was a whole bunch of other things that clouded their thinking in regards to being reconciled to God. And he was doing his best to bring the gospel to them, to bring them out of the deception that they were in. So we pick up this story in Acts chapter 17. And Paul has just finished talking to a bunch of people, and he finds himself in the city of Athens, which was a Greek city, and there was tons of idols and different types of worship to other gods. And so he's in this city, and in verse 16 we start out, and he says this. It says, "Now while Paul waited for them," he was waiting for some of his companions, waited for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him when he saw that the city was given over to idols. Therefore, he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and with the Gentiles and worshipers, and in the marketplace daily with those who happened to be there. Well, one thing that I think we need to understand here in dealing with people that you believe are deceived, Paul gives a perfect model on how we need to do this. First of all, it talks about the fact, it says that his spirit provoked him to do something. Now, as I look at some of the things that are going on today in our culture, there's a lot of people who feel provoked to talk to people who are in deception. But the first thing I want to question is, and I want you to ask yourself this, if you find yourself getting worked up over some of the things in our culture today, ask yourself why. Why are you provoked to talk to people about some of your views? And often I'm finding that in Christianity today, the idea of being provoked to talk to people about your views, whether it's your religious views or whether it's your political views or whether it's your views about cultural issues like passports, I find, again, there's a lot of people that are provoked to tell you their views. And in all of these, we've done a great damage, I believe, whether we're Christians or not, but I want to use Christians in particular, that as Christians, often we've been provoked to tell people our view in such a way that we want to beat them into submission or in such a way that we would win an argument with facts. This is not how Paul approached this situation or any situation involving evangelism, reaching people. Now, in this particular instance, he was trying to reach people and show them that they were deceived. But notice, it says here that the Spirit provoked Paul. The Spirit provoked within him when he saw that the city was given over to idols. And then it goes further. It says, therefore, he reasoned with them. Understand Paul's heart here. Paul's entire message was viewed in such a way that he had compassion for these people. He understood that they were in this position because they didn't understand. And he wanted to do everything he could, not just to win an argument, not just to look good, but he wanted to do everything he could to try to help these people understand that what they were doing was hurting them rather than helping them. So the first thing that I want to challenge you with in asking about whether you're provoked to talk to people about your views, are you provoked because you love them? Are you provoked because you actually care about them? And from there, the first step in dealing with that I want to talk about today is the fact that if you are provoked by love to try to actually help people because you care about them, then the first thing we need to do is try to seek ways that we can actually reason with these people rather than try to just win an argument, try to just present facts so that to belittle them. I've found many times, even in my own life, I think back to a story where a teacher was trying to teach me a lesson. And it was grade 4. I won't say the teacher's name, even though nobody will probably remember anyway. But I was in grade 4, and I was learning my times tables, and I really wasn't applying myself as good as I should have. But I remember that my teacher would get up, and we'd stand up in front of the class, and she'd ask us our times tables, a certain one. And I remember specifically, I got up one day, and she says to me, 6 times 7. And I said, I don't know. And then she'd go to the next student. The next day, I got up, and she would ask me, 6 times 7. And I said, I don't know. And this went on, and I think maybe by the third day, I got up, and she said, 6 times 7. I said, I don't know. And she looked at me, she says, tomorrow, if you don't know 6 times 7, I'm giving you a detention at lunch. So I went home. I didn't want to get a detention. I went home, and I memorized 6 times 7 is 42. Well, the next day came, and we got up in front of the class, and I stood up, and she looked at me, and she said, 6 times 7. And I looked at her, and I said, 42. And she said, 7 times 6. And I went blank. And she looked at me, and she says, you've got a detention at lunch. And I'm going to tell you, as a kid, I couldn't put all that stuff together. But I remember that story. Obviously, I remember it till now. And I'll tell you why I remember that so much is because that teacher absolutely belittled me over something that I just plain and simply didn't understand. Did I do my best to understand that? Absolutely I did. But after that, she had to prove her point, and she belittled me by doing it. And as a child, not only did I dislike that teacher for eons, I won't say forever, because obviously as a Christian I've forgiven her, but as a child, I lived with that for a long time, and I did not look at that teacher with the same eyes ever. I had zero respect for that teacher, for that entire school year and beyond. So for us as believers, we have to understand that as Christians, we already have a lot of people that don't agree with some of our views and all those things. And even though, we may be steadfast in our heart about what we believe, we have to remember that we are still here because there is people who are doomed to spend eternity away from God. And God has left us here to try to reach people with that message. And so with everything that we do with people that don't agree with our views, I think we need to approach it the same way that Paul approaches it, whether it's your religion, whether it's your politics, whether it's your cultural issues. We have to approach these things in such a way that we are trying to win people. We're not just trying to win arguments. And so we see here again that Paul used the opportunity to try and reason with people. People that are in deception, they don't know it. And there's often opportunity that if they give opportunity for us to reason, which often in this culture, people don't want to talk about other people's views. But in this particular setting and with our settings, we have to look for opportunities to at least reason with people. And often you'll find out when you do reason with people, there may be things that you overlooked. So it is important that we approach all situations with the opportunity to try and reason with people, because that's truly what's going to get results. Now, as we move on from this story, we can see that Paul, he began talking with these people, and then some of these people thought, you know what? Maybe what Paul's talking about, we need to really let him talk to some of the people that know what they're talking about. And with some of our cultural issues, isn't it amazing how we've got people that are very well versed in some of the things that are going on? They're the professionals. They're the ones who have studied these things. And that's who we need to trust. Often our expression is we need to trust the science. So if we're going to trust the science, who do we trust? The scientists. So what they did is they thought, we need to get Paul in front of some of these people. And some of them, I'm sure, were thinking, we'll get Paul in front of some of these people that are going to, really straighten Paul out because they're the great thinkers of the day. Well, that brings us to this group called the Areopagus. Now, the Areopagus, they were men in Greece. Actually, there was a rock of marble that they would meet on, and there was 100 of them in this council that people looked at as being the great thinkers of the day. They were philosophers, former cabinet members. There were people that were respected as being great thinkers. And so anytime there was a thing that needed to be pondered, they would bring their thoughts or their ideas to these guys, and they would start thinking about these things and come up with ideas. So Paul finds himself in front of these great thinkers. And in verse 22, this is what Paul does. It says, "Then Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus and said, 'Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. For as I was passing through and considering the objects of your worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. Therefore, the one whom you worship without knowing, him I proclaim to you.'" Wow. And then he goes on and begins to talk about Jesus and how that relates with some of the beliefs and customs they have, and how this statue of the unknown God is actually pertaining to the God he's telling them about right now. But and he goes on. I encourage you to read that next part. But for the sake of time, I just want to move on from that. What I want to establish here is that Paul does something very interesting, again, in trying to reason with people that have a very different view than he does. Now, keep in mind, these guys, they're not Jesus believers. They're not Christians. They're people that are steeped in Greek mythology, and a lot of their thinking is based on Greek mythology. Therefore, they've got all these statues, and Paul sees all these statues. And what's the first thing that he tries to do in order to, again, not win an argument, but to win people, to try and help people that are deceived? What he does is he tries to find common ground in what they believe so that he can try to explain truth to them so that they would ultimately see it. I find this often in dealing with some of the cultural issues. One of the things, I'll give you an example. I don't care whether people believe that they should be wearing a mask or shouldn't be wearing a mask during the current things that we're going through. I've heard many people give their argument on it. But what I do is, and this is what Paul did, Paul studied out, he observed what was going on in that culture to try and help them understand. He used their own culture to try and help them see some of the errors that they may have. And one of the things that I've often used lately to make people think in our culture is when it comes to mask mandates. Anybody that has studied this out according to what the culture believes, it's been widely received. And again, whether you receive this or not, I'm just telling you this is what's widely received. That wearing a mask is not to protect those who wear it. The regular little masks that we wear over our face, the face coverings during this time, there hasn't been any studies that say that those masks are to protect you. But some say, many believe that, and this is why many places still wear the masks, they say that we wear those masks to protect those around us, whether it's because of things that come out of our mouth, and I'm not talking about words, but the masks we wear them, the studies show we wear them to protect other people, not to protect us. Now, almost everybody would agree that that's what has been laid down, that's what studies say, and that's why they tell us we're supposed to wear the mask. Okay, if that is the case, then what would be the reasonable thinking of wearing a mask when you are driving alone in your car? According to any study, it doesn't make any sense for us to be wearing a mask when we're driving alone in our car if there's nobody around us that can get sick while we do it and the mask doesn't protect us. Now, there's some people that when you tell them that, and if you do it in such a way where they realize you're not just trying to argue with them and win an argument, common sense will tell you that driving alone in your car with a mask on doesn't really make a lot of sense according to science. So this is just one thing. But I really believe that with a lot of these things, that maybe you feel strongly about, ask the Lord. If you feel that your view is right and you want to talk with somebody because you care about them, often God will show you some of these things that we often used to refer to as common sense. But again, one person's common sense is not another's in this day and age. But these are things that if you really do care about people, the Lord can show you things to try and help people see that maybe some of the things that they've bit into are really not based on science. They're not based on fact. But again, if you're trying to win an argument, you often won't even have opportunity, because when we're in argument mode, more often than not, when you're arguing with somebody, when you're talking, you are not listening. And unfortunately, if we approach this wrong, it causes us to not have dialogue. Nobody wants to talk about these things because they're so firm in their views. So how we approach this is really important. So what Paul did here is he began to take some of their thinking, their stuff, and began to reason with them in conjunction with their own ways of thinking to help reveal truth. Now, in order to do that, he had to know what their thinking was. And this, as a Christian, whether it's your religion or cultural things, I think it's really important. Number one, to know why you believe what you believe. And that right there is a story in itself. There's a lot of people who go to church. They know what they believe, but they don't know why. It's very important that you cultivate your walk with Jesus, that you, in such a way that you're constantly learning, that you're testing yourself, testing why do I believe this? But once you are firm in your faith and you're confident in that, then I would strongly suggest that this is the next step you take, is that you do need to delve into why other people do think the way that they think. We should never live in fear that, for me, I'm not worried that any other religion is all of a sudden going to have an argument with me and tell me that, all the things that I believed about Jesus are untrue. No, too late for that. I've done enough studying and I've done enough. My relationship with God is in such a place that nobody's ever going to convince me of that one. There is some absolutes. I can trust the Bible 100%. There's absolutes in my life. We need to have those. But when you've got those, I think it is important, let me stress, it is important that you have a strong foundation, because then when you begin to look into other views, you're not as going to be easily swayed, because there is things that if you don't have a firm foundation, you could get swayed to the point where you would even reject Christ, and that's a long way down the line. But I say that to say this. We need to have an understanding about why people think the way that they think, about all these different views. If you're not willing to even find out why people think the way they think, then you're never going to be able to get into that place where you can reason with them. And doing that means that you need to listen. For me, with some of these cultural issues, as much as I get upset about it at times, I've got a wide range of people that I listen to, I've got a wide range of friends on Facebook that have views. I don't just shut them off. I want to know why they think the way they think. Because if I can have that revealed to me, then it'll also assist in me being able to come up with things that are going to help them, again, get out of the point of being deceived. But I have to love them enough to do that, again. So knowing a little bit about why they think the way they think, that takes some research, that takes some time. And as a believer, this is an indication that we do care. If you might say, well, I believe what I believe and it doesn't matter. If somebody doesn't want to believe that way, that's up to them. Well, then, my friend, we have missed the entire point about why we are here and what Paul was trying to do here, the heart of an evangelist. People need to know the truth. And the Bible talks about the fact that it's the truth that truly sets us free. People that are operating in deception, they are not truly free. And we are set here as ambassadors for the Lord to try and help people get to that place where they can truly be free. But you have to have a heart for God, and from there, a heart for people. Now, I want you to also notice that as Paul goes through this, and as again, if you read this from verses 24 to 31, which I'm not going to read for the sake of time, you can see here that Paul, in reasoning with them with their own thinking or their own thoughts, the one thing Paul did not do is he did not compromise what he believed. He didn't mix what he believed to the point where, yeah, you can believe some and not, and some of what I believe and what you believe, and that's okay. There's a real tendency from humans, from mankind, to want to please people, to not want to be rejected by people. Paul wasn't scared of being rejected by people. He was concerned with seeing people come out of deception, but that didn't hinder the message that he was trying to bring. He did not compromise the truth just to be accepted by people. And this is important for us. When it comes to truth, when it comes to something that we really believe is bedrock truth, if we're going to try and help people, don't compromise on the truth. Don't sugarcoat the truth. We speak the truth in love, but we do not compromise truth. And that leads me to the last point today, which we see here starting in verse 32. After he had spoken to them, it says, "And when they heard of the resurrection of the dead," this is one of the things Paul was talking about, "some mocked, while others said, 'We will hear you again on this matter.' And so Paul departed from among them. However, some men joined him and believed, among them Dionysius, the Areopagite, a woman named Demarius, and others with them." I want you to notice here that not everybody took up the message that Paul preached, and from there, he made the decision to depart from them. And it says, some followed, some didn't. But those people that didn't agree with him, he did depart from them. There will be a time with a lot of the views that you have where people are absolutely going to say, "I don't agree with you," and they might even be angry with you. And you have to know there is a time where, you just depart from those people. I've heard many people, got an argument over Facebook over this, and I've blocked them off of Facebook. That might be the case. That's between you and the Lord. But a lot of times that might not be the correct thing to do. And again, I would say that you need to do this prayerfully. Gauge your heart on how you depart. And what I mean by that is this. It may be that you depart from them, but it may only be for a season. We want to do our absolute best not to get to the point where we burn bridges with people, where there's no opportunity maybe down the road as things maybe change in their heart, as we pray for them, maybe they have a change of heart, but a lot of them will never come talk to us because maybe of that confrontation that they had with us. They'd be embarrassed to. Again, how we approach these situations is really important in regards to, again, seeing people being able to come to the place where they're not deceived anymore. So, the idea of walking away from somebody, often we need to keep in mind, it may only be temporary. And again, we're not walking away in such a way where we say, I hate that person, I'll never talk to them again, like I've seen on a lot of social media. No, we need to approach it like this. Now is not the time. They are obviously not ready to hear this message, and so I am going to depart because really, right now, it is fruitless to try and continue to, as Paul said, reason with them. So that's where for us, I have the comfort in knowing that, we're not going to win everybody over. And from there, we hand them over to the Lord for Him to deal with them as He sees fit. Well, I hope you got something out of that today. And again, if you did, I just want to ask you to consider becoming a subscriber to our channel and liking and sharing this video with anybody that you think that it will help. Well, I really enjoyed our session of Daily Renewal today. But until next time, God bless you and have a great day.